This DVD is about collaborative partnerships with families and communities, that is, Quality Area 6. We cannot meet the requirements of the NQS without addressing this issue in some detail. Before we start, some brief background about us. Many of you know us already, but for those of you who don't, as you can see, we have worked in the early education and care sector for quite a few years, and in a variety of roles. Together, we form the ELF Made Easy team and are the creators of the ELF Made Easy products. During this session, we will define collaborative partnerships, detail the links to the NQS, discuss the characteristics of collaborative partnerships, identify what might be different now, examine examples of collaboration including simple, short-term involvement through to more long-term complex projects. And we will profile QA6 in action. To understand this topic, we need to be clear about the meaning of these terms, because the NQF framework has introduced a number of new words that we need to incorporate into our work. So what is collaboration? It is an interactive, creative process where people with diverse expertise and knowledge work together to achieve mutually defined goals. It is where decision-making is shared, often equally. And it means all parties have a deep commitment and determination to reach the agreed goals. And a partnership is an arrangement where parties agree to cooperate to advance their mutual interests. While the title of this session rightly references the QA6, we must also acknowledge that collaboration and partnership are threaded through all 7 quality areas. However, our focus today is, of course, the QA6. Our reference, as always, is the National Quality Standard and the ELF and My Time Our Place, if your service has outside school hours care, of course, and your relevant state or territory kindergarten learning guide. As you can see, we have used the Queensland Kindergarten Learning Guide in this example. To put us all on the same page, we will look at the requirements of QA6. What exactly are these? There are 3 sections to QA6, 6.1, 6.2 and 6.3. Each of these has separate elements. 6.1 is respectful and supportive relationships with families that are developed and maintained. 6.1.1, there is an effective enrolment process for families. 6.1.2, families have opportunities to be involved in the service and contribute to service decisions. 6.1.3, current information about the service is available to families. What about 6.2? That is, families are supported in their parenting role and their values and beliefs about child rearing are respected. 6.2.1, the expertise of families is recognised and they share in decision making about their child's learning and well-being. 6.2.2, current information is available to families about community services and resources to support parenting and family well-being. 6.3 has 4 sections, and it is the service collaborates with other organisations and service providers to enhance children's learning and well-being. 6.3.1, it links with relevant community and support agencies and they are established and maintained. 6.3.2, continuity of learning and transitions for each child are supported by sharing relevant information and clarifying responsibilities. 6.3.3, access to inclusion and support assistance is facilitated. 6.3.4, the service builds relationships and engages with their local community. Once again, your service is likely to meet the requirements of 6.3.1 and 6.3.3. We will be showing examples of 6.3.2 and 6.3.4 in action. Before that, we need to be clear about the meaning of some of the new terms: parent contribution, involvement, and collaborative partnerships. Contribution and involvement are the stepping stones of the relationship building process. Parents relate to services on various levels, often starting with simple contributions. We are familiar with these because we all use this method to obtain materials for our programs and gather items of interest to show the children. As parents and educators build positive relations, collaboration becomes possible. Parents and educators can then work together to help children celebrate learning outcomes. In this way, parents contribute directly to the program, so goals for the children, jointly planned by parents and educators, are achieved. Contribution and involvement are integral to collaboration. They increase parents' comfort and confidence levels. They promote parents' understanding of how the service functions and builds positive relationships with educators. Collaborative partnerships extend on these. We are all familiar with brief arrival and departure chats with families. Of course, these are important and will continue. Similarly, when parents assist with regular tasks, such as cutting fruit, it is not collaboration, but again is part of relationship building that can lead to collaborative partnerships. It is very helpful to us, of course, and we appreciate the assistance. So what exactly are collaborative partnerships? We've thought about it and put together 11 elements or characteristics that you will find in a very good collaborative partnership. Let's look at these together. Collaborative partnerships are authentic, genuine, and meaningful. They encompass more than contribution and surface involvement, such as those examples we've previously seen. Collaborative partnerships accommodate preferred ways of communication. They reflect what families want, not what educators think families need. They are a commitment communicated initially, repeated frequently, and evidenced consistently throughout the service. They provide opportunity to participate in long and short-term, simple and complex projects. Collaborative partnerships include a range of avenues, for example, practical, written and technical, and offer flexible timing for participation. They seek all perspectives and opinions and allow for shared decision-making. They draw upon all strengths, talents and interests of families, i.e. values and respects individual difference. They acknowledge parents as children's first and most enduring educators, and they provide verbal and written feedback when parents' ideas are included. This is where you get to offer your ideas in your first group discussion. Talk about this list of 11 characteristics of collaborative partnerships. Do you have any characteristics your group would like to add? Share an example of how one item on the list has been or could be implemented in a service.
Welcome back. During your discussion, you may have identified other characteristics of collaborative partnerships. You would also have shared interesting examples to illustrate the characteristics. This example came from an educator in one of our workshops. Her service drew upon the skills and interests of the families from a broad range of cultural backgrounds by holding what she called a rich culture day. The families and educators brought along their favourite foods. The event recognised that for many, gathering around the table is a much-loved social ritual. The event was highly successful and enabled families to understand and learn more about each other and the service. Collaborative partnerships grew from there. You heard earlier that services may need to change their practices to meet these 4 NQS elements. Shortly you will see examples of collaborative partnerships which will help you with all 4 areas. But first, some easy to implement ideas for NQS 6.1.2 and 6.2.1. Both elements relate to parents having a greater say in the service's decision-making, especially about their child's learning and well-being. Let's consider for a moment your service's current physical environment. You may be unaware that this environment could create barriers to parents developing collaborative partnerships. Research has shown that if the service's physical environment reflects only children's needs and interests, parents are likely to feel uncertain about what is expected of them and are less likely to become involved. Parents also struggle to find a sense of belonging in such an exclusively child and educator space. This creates a barrier to collaborative partnerships. So how can we fix this? One way is to look closely at your service's physical environment through parents' eyes. Barriers can be present from the very start with the approach to your service. The outside appearance of your building sets the tone. Does it create a sense of welcome, as this one does? Believe it or not, this is the entrance to an approved, purpose-built service. Just how inviting is this space? Do you think parents and children would feel as if they belong? Of course, your foyer may well be quite a different design, but it can still be warm to all who come into the service. Here's another foyer. It also looks homely and welcoming for parents and children. Although children access this area, it remains well cared for because parents respect it and remind their children to do the same, just like they do when they visit friends' homes and other lovely places. Using familiar items such as cane baskets, intriguing objects and greenery are another means to create a home-like, relaxed atmosphere for parents and meet the ELF requirements at the same time. Don't forget to include adult-friendly furniture in the playground as well, such as this wooden bench. The children and educators will also appreciate it. Another aspect that we may need to rethink to overcome barriers to collaborative partnerships is the way we communicate with families. We manage our greetings well. We approach parents with a smile and spend a short time with them. Parents feel welcomed for the moment. However, the signs around the service may create quite a different feel. We have all been to services where, unfortunately, signs and directions as blunt as these are displayed in areas used by parents and visitors. Signs like this detract from the real message of welcome that we ideally would like to convey. In contrast, this sign at the entrance of a service is one that parents can relate to. It looks familiar. It's what they see out in the community. The pot plant holder actually houses spare umbrellas for parents to use on rainy days. The message to parents throughout this service was that they counted, and that translates to parent involvement. Take a fresh look at the signs in your service and put yourself in parents' shoes. How do the signs make you feel? Read your service's policies. Are they written clearly and concisely, perhaps with photos? Is your service's family handbook a good read, or is it more like an instruction manual? Is the language respectful, inclusive and empowering? Does it convey to parents that it is their right to be involved in all decisions about their child? We may also need to change the way we connect with the community if we are to meet NQS 6.3.1 and 6.3.4. The examples of collaborative partnerships you will see next will give you some ideas about that. However, we need to be more proactive. We need to establish links with organisations and individuals within the community, not just those directly related to the service, such as early intervention agencies. We might also connect with retirement villages, libraries, plant nurseries, medical and dental surgeries, and the like. In this section, you will see 4 very different examples of collaborative partnerships in action. At the end of each example, we'll talk about how it meets the NQS and reflects the characteristics of collaborative partnerships. The first example is from an early education and care service in Montreal. The children's ages varied from 2 years to school age. Jacques, a 3-year-old, was especially intrigued by monarch butterflies. His mother brought to the service this photograph of Jacques' hand with a beautiful monarch butterfly sitting on it. The mother told the educator that she was one of many volunteers in the community taking part in a monarch monitoring project, and Jacques' interest had come from there. The educator built on Jacques' interest by introducing books and puzzles about monarch butterflies, then purchased a small butterfly hatching kit complete with a caterpillar. The interest and excitement amongst the children, parents and educators grew over the next 4 weeks as they watched the life cycle unfold. During these weeks, the children painted and completed craft activities about its life cycle, and the educator and parents also photographed and documented the changes along the way. The local library and supermarket displayed the children's artwork and a selection of the photographs. Parents suggested a visit to the insect museum attached to the nearby university. The parents then worked with the educator to arrange the excursion. In the meantime, the children made insect hats to wear, just like the one you see here. At the museum, each child looked through a microscope, saw the extraordinary butterfly collection, and handled some live creatures such as stick insects. The parents were as interested as the children. They took photographs which became part of the educator's documentation. The monarch butterfly hatched late one Friday afternoon. Families were invited to its tag and release on the following Sunday. Everyone watched intently as the educator brought out the monarch in its container and explained what was about to happen. One of the parents, an orienteer, used his compass to show the direction it would fly to reach Mexico. Another, a pilot, showed how to check the temperature and wind conditions and explained that the monarch would fly more than 2,000 kilometres, which takes him 5 hours to fly in his plane. One of the older siblings recorded the date, temperature, wind conditions, and that the monarch was a male. For the curious, the male has 2 highly visible black spots on its hind wings and thinner black webbing within the wings, while the female has no spots and the webbing is thicker. An entomologist from the museum wrote information on the tag, including when and where it was released. She fixed the tag on the monarch's wing. Everyone was amazed that its seemingly fragile wing could support the tag and still be able to fly. The monarch was released and everyone hoped it would land on them. Finally, it landed on one mother's hand, and as you can see, it was a magic moment for mother and child. To recap, this experience was initiated through a child's interest, a simple photograph brought from home. An educator recognised the opportunity as one to facilitate an inclusive collaborative partnership with parents and the community. You might like to pause the DVD now while you take a moment to think about which of the NQS elements this example meets and which of the characteristics of collaborative partnership it reflects. During your discussion, you would have discovered that it meets NQS 6.1.2, 6.2.1 and 6.3.4. You would have also discovered that this example reflects collaborative partnership characteristics 1, 2, 4 and 6, which are highlighted on your screen, and 7 and 9.
This is a familiar example of parent contribution and involvement, but it is not really a full collaborative partnership. Parent contribution and involvement examples like this still have their place, so they are important to continue. On this occasion, one of the children told a story about seeing a textured mosaic artwork on the walls of the local shopping centre. Inspired by the story, educators and children discussed how natural items can be decorative and make our learning spaces appealing, even in outdoor areas. After thinking about how this could be so, a plan was made to create a series of natural textured artworks on an outdoor wall to imitate the mosaic wall in the shopping centre. The new interest and plan were communicated to families via newsletter and a series of posters and design ideas for families to peruse. Parents were invited to assist and to bring any suitable materials they could spare. One of the children's granddads, who is a carpenter, kindly offered to help by supplying suitable timber pieces for the backboards and committed to assisting with the installation of the finished product. The granddad visited the service to discuss plans and details for the project with the children and their educators. Everyone measured out the space together and decided how many boards might fit. and decided on the shape the boards might need it to be. Educators and children completed the panels over a couple of weeks, using a range of textured materials, some brought in by families and others sourced by educators. Each stage of the project was documented and photographs taken to record events as they occurred. The granddad was involved from start to finish, visiting a second time to help install the panels, with children's supervision of course. The textured wall has been deemed a great success. The children enjoyed this process so much that they began looking for ways to do another project. They decided that they could make some panels using everyday items as well, and a second wall was born. Once again, Grandad provided timber and children found some man-made materials to use for the colour and texture on the panels. These were mounted, with the help of one of the parents, on the shed wall to create a colourful textured walkway. These small projects provided an opportunity for a granddad and parents to be involved in service events. This is another example of a short-term project with parent contribution and involvement. It extends beyond the token to a further step, actual involvement in the creation of the item at hand. Rather than only have parents bring in clean milk bottles, educators in this instance invited a dad who is a plumber to help construct the igloo with the children using some of the materials he works with regularly. He explained how he usually uses each of the materials in his work, but then talked about how they could be used a different way to help build the igloo. Children were fascinated by this process and discussed how everyday things can sometimes be used in a variety of ways. Children eagerly helped to hold and stabilise the shape as it was put together. The children discussed how strong the igloo might be and decided with skillful educator guidance to develop a set of rules for its safe use. A pleasing surprise occurred when they looked inside the igloo to see all the colours glowing with the light behind them. A range of textured cushions were placed inside the igloo to create a soothing and quiet space indoors. This became a popular small group space for reading and conversation. In this case, parent involvement went beyond simply providing milk bottles. The parents spent time discussing what they hoped to build with the educator and the children, then completed the project with the children's and educators' assistance. As you can imagine, this has become a much-loved space in the room. Of course, educators photographed each step and made a laminated book about the igloo adventure for children to revisit and as a way to document the event. Which of the QA6 links do these examples satisfy? Which characteristics on the Collaborative Partnerships list do these illustrate? You might like to pause the DVD now while you take a moment to think about and discuss which of the characteristics are reflected here. Welcome back. During your discussion, you would have identified the following links: 6.1.2, 6.2.1 and 6.3.4 to QA6. The collaborative partnerships illustrated in this example are numbers 1, 2, 6, 7 and 9. Take a moment to read these. Also, remember to consider that parents, regardless of where and how they live, hold strong beliefs about the experiences their children need. Collaborative partnerships work in all communities, affluent or less affluent. The goals of these partnerships will vary considerably between situations. Let's look at two very different examples. This collaboration developed out of a discussion held between two parents and an educator. Parents were concerned that children didn't really understand how to grow food or understand how the soil works, or how to get the best out of it to survive. This was an important issue for these families as they live in a poor community outside of Cape Town, South Africa, with high unemployment rates and limited resources. After discussions, the educators and families came up with a plan to address the issue. They approached the local authority where one of the dads worked and invited them to participate in a project. A joint decision was taken that a worm farm might be a great way to begin young children's understanding of how the soil and gardening works with nature. Each partner in the scheme took on a task. The local authority provided the worm farm and placed it in a location accessible for children, in the park near the centre. The service environment would clearly benefit from the addition of some new gardens. Educators began talking about growing food in their programs and about developing a garden in the centre. Families agreed to place food scraps in a small container that children could bring along to the centre and place in the worm food bin. Educators and children take the accumulated food to the worm farm each week. When the worm byproduct is ready, the centre uses it to enrich the garden beds they have established. Crops grown in their program are sent home to families when they have excess produce. Children are now accustomed to spending a small amount of time each week in the garden, tending, watering and caring for plants, checking the health of the soil and other associated tasks. In this collaboration, a real need is being met and knowledge children will need in future is being built. Families' concern and the centre's understanding of their community combined to identify an issue that is important and found a way to support that need. Together, they planned and developed a meaningful, ongoing partnership with local authorities. The Worm Farm project is now part of the local landscape. This small collaboration will have long-term benefits for the community, as children grow up to know and understand more about how they can work with the earth, worms and all, to produce better food crops for their families in turn. Brenda will now share another example of collaborative partnerships in a contrasting setting. The two examples are very different. However, they share some common elements and you will have an opportunity to discuss them afterwards.
The final example of a successful collaborative partnership between educators, families and the community comes from a school in Montreal with a childcare centre attached. The collaboration was initiated and largely driven by two particular parents. Their involvement in the school prior to this project had been limited to attending the usual educator-parent meetings. The two parents, one an engineer, the other a council officer, knew each other through their work. They heard of a grant available to education and care services to upgrade their outdoor learning spaces. The two parents approached the school and offered to write the proposal for the grant if the educators at the school would contribute supporting information. Should the proposal be successful, the parents were willing to coordinate the project within their respective work schedules. The principal of the school agreed. In preparing the proposal, the parents assessed the existing playground space and checked for any structural items such as drainage that would need to be considered in the design. As you can see, the playground space had its limitations. The parents met with the educators to gather information about the curriculum and how the outdoor learning space would be used to further children's learning across each curriculum area. This is a summary of the information the educators provided about how natural items in the space, such as leaves and stones, could be used by the children to develop their understanding of early maths concepts. The two parents and the educators then devised a list of benefits the outdoor area would bring to the children and their learning. As you can see, the list reflected the commitment of the school and community to conservation. It also considers the children's need for additional sunlight in the Canadian climate. Next, they listed those who would benefit from the outdoor area. The parents especially wanted the playground to reflect the community. So before they commenced the design for the space, they met with members of the community, local artists and craftsmen to canvass their ideas. In consultation with the school, the parents then submitted the plan and application. The grant was approved and the work on the playground began. As with the planning process, everyone was involved. The older children helped to spread the tan bark, and the artists and craftsmen installed their creations. The reading chair, wooden xylophone, logs with built-in game boards for checkers and chess, and stumps arranged as an auditorium. This cupboard contains a multi-purpose teaching board. The back of the cupboard has storage for seat cushions made by mothers in the parent committee. Isn't this lovely? The local community really wanted to make a statement about its commitment to sustainability. To summarise this example, the parents took the lead and the educators supported their efforts. The community was extensively involved, as were the children. It's a wonderful example of shared power and decision-making. authentic, meaningful and purposeful collaboration, and of how parents will be involved if they can choose the project and adjust the time frame to accommodate the demands of their work and family responsibilities. This area is well used and is a popular meeting spot outside school hours and during school holidays. Although very different in nature, the collaborative partnerships in the African example and this one from Canada have much in common. Pause the DVD and take a few moments to discuss which of the QA6 elements both examples meet and the characteristics of the collaborative partnerships that both entail. Welcome back. During your discussion, you would have discovered that it meets NQS 6.1.2, 6.2.1, 6.3.1 and 6.3.4. Both examples also reflect the highlighted characteristics 1, 2, 4 and 6, and also 7, 8, 9 and 10. You may decide they also reflect other characteristics and include them as well. So now that we know more about collaborative partnerships, let's apply it to a real setting. Your task is to use the information shared in this session to construct a profile of a service meeting QA6. In other words, what a service looks like, feels like, sounds like, if it establishes collaborative partnerships with families and the community. You may find it helpful to set your responses out like this and display it as a reminder for your team. After your discussion, share your ideas about what QA6 looks like in action. Your final task is to write down the 3 changes that you will make to your practices as a result of information shared during this session. In this DVD, we have defined collaborative partnerships, detailed the NQS requirements, discussed the characteristics of collaborative partnerships, decided what you might do differently now. We have also looked at a variety of collaborative partnerships and profiled collaborative partnerships in action. We hope you have enjoyed this presentation and found it helpful. Thank you.